Hello. I'm going to talk to you today about China. Okay. And I'm going to be honest with you right up front. I want to make the recommendation that if you are American or from the Western world, you're just better off not coming to China. You're better off not coming here. Um, I have lived in China for almost 12 years. I've lived in China the first time in for just 1 year in 2005, and then I came back to China in the year 2010 and have lived continuously in this country from 2010, April 2010, until the making of this video, which is in December of 2021. So 11 years and some change. So why do I recommend that you not come to China? Well, I find that when I speak in the abstract or in generalities, people have a tendency to misrepresent what I say, to misunderstand what I say, and to, you know, uh, either intentionally or unintentionally, they just don't seem to follow what I say. Maybe I'm inarticulate. I don't know. So I'm gonna speak in concrete terms, and I'm gonna give you a concrete example. Now, I want to mention that this is an example, so it's not specifically about this one isolated event. I'm using a smaller example of a smaller event to be illustrative of a bigger problem with China. Okay? So here it goes. So when I first came to China, I was an ESL teacher. I taught English as a second language in a tutoring center. So before they hired me, this tutoring center, and then before they hired me, as well as during the training and orientation period, they said many things, but three things in particular that they said were, we will use a team teaching approach in which you will be working in concert with a locally hired Chinese speaker of English, a locally hired Chinese English teacher will be working in concert with you, okay? You are not allowed to speak any language other than English in the classroom, okay, on the premises of the school, because they want it to be an immersive experience. And the other thing that they said was you are not required to have any pre-existing knowledge of China, its language, its culture, its society, its history, anything like that, before we hire you. So remember, omission is itself a statement. So if you're saying you don't want to include that as a hiring standard, the ability to speak Chinese is not something we expect to see on your resume, then you are implicitly saying that you don't expect people to, I mean, some people might have that ability and work there anyway, but you're not looking for somebody with that ability. So that's a statement that that type of skill is not necessary to work there, right? So you look at these three statements, okay? You're working with a locally hired Chinese person. You have to speak English with that person and with everybody else on the school premises. You are not required to speak Chinese as a requirement to work there, okay? So if you consider these three statements like postulates in a geometry theorem, okay, use logic, because logic is more important than culture, okay? Then they are implicitly saying, okay, that the teaching assistant, the Chinese teacher of English that you will be working with, can speak English, yes? These three statements added together add up to, well, a number of different corollaries, but one corollary would be your teaching assistant, your Chinese teacher of English partner, whatever you want to call it, is going to speak English with you, right? They are going to be a teacher of English. You have to work with them. They are not allowed to speak any language other than English, neither are you. And you're not required to have any Chinese language ability to work there anyway. I mean, some people might have that ability, but it's not something they're looking for. So those three things put together means that a statement is being made that the Chinese teacher of English, that you'll be working with can speak English. Now, in addition to that implicit statement, so that's an implicit statement, they also explicitly said, your teaching assistant will speak English. The Chinese teacher of English that you will be partnered with will speak English, okay? So this was an explicit statement that they said, my manager said to my face before I taught my very first class. So a statement is made, the Chinese teacher speaks English, and that statement is being made both implicitly and explicitly. They implied that she can speak English because one, she's a teacher of English. Two, you're required to speak English on school premises. And three, they don't include Chinese language ability as a hiring requirement. And they also explicitly said, this person speaks English, okay? My very first class, I walk into the classroom. I haven't met my partner yet. And I walk up to this person. It was a young woman, maybe in her 20s. And I say hello to her. Hello, how are you? My name is Michael. And then her face became red, like beet red. And she turned to this other person standing next to her, another Chinese person who wasn't in my class. It wasn't, this is right before class began. And it was just some person who was there for some other reason. And they were making conversation beforehand. And she said, oh, 我不懂，听不懂。我英语不好, which is Chinese for, oh, I don't understand. My English is not good. So she was very embarrassed. And at first I thought this was like just her being bashful. Oh, by the way, I can speak Mandarin. I studied Mandarin before I came to China, and obviously it's gotten better in the years. But even back then, I could speak a little bit, well enough to understand that. And then she, I thought maybe she was just being bashful, or she was trying in the beginning. But as I tried to communicate with her more, it became very evident that her English language ability was very poor. And she had almost no ability to speak English at all. Very basic things like hello, how are you, or where are the flashcards for today's lesson, or do you know the names of the students? Are the students here yet? Things like this. She struggled with those things. She had no ability to say those things, right? So her English language ability was clearly far below what I had been led to believe it would be, right? And it was certainly insufficient to be a teacher of English. So later I asked, so a statement was made, the Chinese teacher can speak English, the Chinese teacher of English can speak English, your partner who will be in the classroom with you to help you teach English can speak English, and the reality that this statement spoke to, they were not congruent. They were not congruent, okay? So a statement was made, the reality that the statement spoke to, they didn't add up. And that is why you should not come to China, okay? So, and when I pointed this out to people, I complained to my manager, I complained to other people about it. I was hit with a slew of logical fallacies, non sequiturs, gaslighting techniques, lies, and bullying, both from the other Chinese who worked there, but also from other non-Chinese, what we call them foreigners, just anybody who isn't a Chinese national. So Americans, British, Canadians, whatever, anybody who's not a Chinese person, Russian people, African people, whatever. So the others who worked at this school with me also, they all just dogpiled me and used all sorts of gaslighting techniques and shit to basically try to make me feel like I was wrong. Okay, but they're the ones who said that she could speak English. Why would you say something if it's not true? And then so they just hit me with a slew of non sequiturs, and let's go through some of them now. So one of them was, China's a developing country, okay? So by this is something you'll hear all the time if you come here. China's a developing country. China's a developing country. So what they meant is China, of course, is not as wealthy or as prosperous. They enjoy a certain level of socioeconomic depression compared to most of the rest of the world. They are not a wealthy country. This is something they would shove in your face anytime something like this happened. And again, I was like, well, I don't see how that's relevant. I mean, yes, I understand China's a developing country. It enjoys a certain level of poverty that we maybe don't have in other parts of the world. And in any case, and maybe that has effects on things that I don't understand as an American. But that doesn't change the fact that a statement was made and then the reality the statement spoke to were not congruent. Okay, either you lied to me, or you're just so stupid that you can't even see when something isn't the case. Like you didn't know this person couldn't speak English, right? Which seems kind of far-fetched. It seems more like a lie, right? And they're like, oh, but China's a developing country. Maybe we can't find enough people out there who can speak English well enough to do this kind of job. And then my rebuttal was, well, if that's the case, then why did you tell me that she could do the job, right? It's not the same thing. Saying that China's a developing country explains why you might not hire somebody who speaks English. It doesn't explain why you didn't tell me about it, right? Because remember, the school, opted to use a team teaching approach. There are many approaches to teaching English, and there are viable approaches to teach English that don't involve using a team teaching method, right? So you opted to use a method that requires you to have somebody who speaks English, right? A locally hired person, a native person of your country that speaks English, right? A team teaching approach, you're going to have a native speaker of English, American, British, whatever, working with a locally hired person who studied English, right? You don't have to use that approach. You can opt for a different approach, but you chose to use this approach, which requires somebody who speaks English. And then more than that, you went out and hired somebody and put them in my classroom, and you told me that they would speak English. So it's not the fact that China is poor and doesn't have people who speak English. There just isn't a big enough pool of talent of people who have the ability to speak English sufficiently because of socioeconomic circumstances. I could have learned to live with that. If you had been honest and just said, maybe we can't find somebody who can speak English, so we have to use a different approach, I would have been amenable to that. But you didn't do that. You said they could speak English and then they couldn't. That's the problem. It's the way that you communicated. The breakdown in logic and communication is the problem. And then so the first fallacy, oh, we're a developing country. So the next fallacy they threw at me was Chinese people communicate differently. Okay, so they say that because Chinese culture is different from Western culture, American culture, what have you, they don't communicate the same way we do. Okay, that's kind of true. But then again, there are many countries in the world that share a culture similar to China, such as Taiwan, Japan, South Korea, Singapore. They're all East Asian countries, traditionally Buddhist, Confucian countries, right? Maybe their mode of communication and their expectations of communication are different. Okay, but if you were working in one of those countries, they wouldn't have done that. And I know that because I worked in Japan prior to working in China. Okay? So this notion of cultural difference was a fallacy because, and even if their culture is different, why would they tell me something that's the opposite of what is the case, right? Is their language and mode of communication really that different that they're going to tell me the complete and total opposite of what's true? That's not, at that point, it's not communication. It's not communication. It's lying or obfuscation. That's not communicating. That's the opposite of communicating, right? That's deception. So there's that. And then the third fallacy was, well, everybody knows. That's the other fallacy they love to throw at you. Everybody knows. You should have known that we weren't going to give you up somebody who spoke English. You should have known that this is how things work in China. You should have known. And again, that's a catch-22. It's circular reasoning. I can't know something if you don't tell me about it, right? There's no such thing as a priori knowledge. There's no such thing as a priori knowledge. There's just not. So a priori knowledge, we mean knowledge that people have magically without having to be taught or having to learn about it. Like it's just magically inside of you. There's no such thing. Even if you want to make an argument like there's our DNA or some, I don't subscribe to stuff like this, but like spiritual beliefs about like, past lives or whatever. I don't believe in that, by the way. But even if that were true, you would still have to learn about the things your DNA or the things your past life teach you, assuming that stuff even can teach you anything, right? Let alone stuff you learn through trial and error or from people telling you about it. I can't know what things are going to be like in China if people don't tell me about it, right? The company, have an obligation to inform your employee of what their expectations are, what the reality of the job is going to be like. I can't know what those things are if you don't tell me. It's a fallacy. It's a catch-22 to say, well, it's a priori knowledge. It's common sense. It's obvious. It's whatever you want to name, whatever argument based on labels, whatever label you want to put on top of a priori knowledge, magical knowledge that you just know. Like I'm magically born with the knowledge that people in China don't speak English even when they tell me that they can. That's horseshit. I'm sorry. That's just nonsense. And then and then finally, the fourth non sequitur they gave me was, do you really need somebody who can speak English to be in your classroom? I thought you were an English teacher. Why do you need the teaching assistant, the Chinese teacher, to speak English? And again, it's a fallacy. It's like, you're right, I don't need them to. I have the ability to teach English without an assistant, without a partner. But you said that she could, right? I mean, why did you tell me that she could if she can't? So again, it's just nonsense. And this story about one little English school where they basically lied to me is just characteristic of China. In the 11 years that I've lived in this country, I have done a lot. I've gone to university here in China. I did my master's degree at a Chinese university, and I tried to do a PhD, but I failed. But I was there for four more years of PhD study. I've been an ESL teacher, and I also worked briefly in a company, a shipping company, logistics, like moving cargo around. So I've done a lot. And these types of things never go away. Chinese people constantly fail to communicate properly. Sometimes it's lies. They just opt not to tell you what is really happening. It might be a lie of omission, or it might be a fabricated lie where they make up stuff that's not true. That's sometimes. And then in other cases, it's just that the flow of information and the breakdown of logic and communication is so terrible that it leads to things like this. Like maybe they genuinely didn't realize that the person they hired couldn't speak English when the job requirement was that she be able to speak English. Like that sounds like insane, but that has been known to happen here. And I've never worked or lived anywhere in my life where this type of stuff happens to the degree that it does over here in China. And I used to have long philosophical discussions. And by the way, I speak Mandarin. My Mandarin's not perfect, of course, but it's good enough that the language barrier isn't a factor when it comes to something like this. And even if I didn't speak Chinese, how could the language barrier be a factor? Like the company website, the training sessions, which were conducted in English, all of that stuff, like they said the teaching assistant could speak English, right? So that's just one small story, but the type of breakdown in communication and logic that occurred in that story, where they literally said one thing and then the reality that the statement they made spoke to were incongruent. Like it happens so much over here, and it's just a waste of time. And the last fallacy is they teach you to pity Chinese people, to feel sorry for them, and to or to like try and be patient with this, and it's just a waste of time. I don't care why things are this way over here. I've stopped trying to understand it. I just know that it is this way, and it sounds extraordinarily almost racist and bigoted to say this, but it's just my honest opinion is you're just better off not coming here. You're just better off not coming to this country. I don't want to live here anymore. Um, their minds are Tiffany twisted, and basically they're always. I'm sorry to say this. The reason that these types of errors happen is it is actually is about poverty. I don't think that Chinese people are stupider than the average person in another country, but I think that the effect of poverty and oppression and the authoritarianism of their government has this effect on the way that they're taught to think and communicate as they grow up. And that combined with just this kind of anxiety about how it's just the case that they're not the best country in the world. They never really, no, there is no such thing as a best country in the world. But they have, it's hard to explain if you haven't lived here. Like there's an anxiety about not looking like you're less than what you are. It's like a person in high school who's anxious about their haircut or about their pimples or their weight or something like that. They just don't like being singled out. And it's frankly, and it affects everything here. And I can't get my mail delivered on time or figure out where I'm supposed to be sometimes or anything like that without these kinds of massive breakdowns in logic and communication that are just, and it's not, if you went to a country like Taiwan or if you went to a country like Mexico, so if you were in Mexico, developing country, poor country, a lot of the same problems China has. I guarantee these kinds of communication breakdowns just wouldn't happen in Mexico. Taiwan, same culture as China. I mean, Taiwan and China are two different countries, but they share a lot in common in terms of culture, language, religion, history. There's a great deal of commonality. So culture, like British people and American people, or you might even go so far as to like British people and like Americans and Canadians, like we're very similar. And so if it were really about culture, then we would expect these types of communication breakdowns that happen in China to also happen in Taiwan, and they just don't. Taiwanese people never behave this way. No, it's a weird combination of things, and China is just not worth living in, frankly. I can't wait to leave. Because, and it doesn't matter how good my Chinese became. It didn't matter how long I lived here. These types of problems never went away. There's always a massive breakdown. There's never the admission that something might go wrong or has gone wrong. It's only ever the case that they tell you what they would like to happen or what they hope will happen or what should happen as though it is happening. And then if it actually, in fact, in the end does happen, then they just declare victory. But if it goes wrong, then they immediately start saying that they start changing their story. It's never the case that they just can just admit like, oh, like if it were an American person, like let's say you lived in America and you opened a Spanish language training center or something, or a Russian language training center in America. You wanted to teach people Chinese in America, for example. Okay, you would not open the school and then hire a bunch of people from China or Taiwan or somewhere and give them a visa and go through all the trouble of bringing them in, only to have them arrive and then have them discover that you told them they would be working with Americans who could speak Chinese, only to find out that there weren't any Americans at your company who spoke Chinese. And when they ask, well, why did you tell us you had that? And you just go, oh, well, it should have been obvious, or, oh, we couldn't find anybody, or, oh, this, or, oh, that. You wouldn't do that. If you were running a Chinese training center in America, you would just be honest, be like, oh, we don't have anybody here who can speak any locally hired Americans at our company who speak Chinese well enough to do that. Sorry. We're telling you that now before we hire you, before we bring you in. Right? That's how we would do it. That's how anybody would do it. Like common sense, necessity. Necessity means you have to do that. You have to communicate with these employees that you're bringing in from another country. Okay? But in China, they just don't think that way. They just think, oh, how should we run an English language training center in China? How should we do that? Oh, I guess we just get some money together, rent a space, hire some foreigners from America or Great Britain or wherever and bring them in. And the pieces will fall into place. Who cares? You know? Oh, this foreigner is complaining that we told him something and it turns out we don't have it. Oh, well, we only said that because in the moment it seemed like it was true. Guess it's not. Why is he complaining about it? You know, fuck him. That's literally how things work around here. And it's mind-boggling. And it's not just ESL training centers. I'm using the ESL training center thing to illustrate a bigger point. Everything here works like this. The government, the post office, the electricity, all of it works like this. It's just constant breakdowns in logic and communication. Sometimes intentionally, people are lying. Other times, it's just the flow of information. You know, there was a kink in the hose. What can I say? And you think about that, and you're probably scratching your head like, how can any place operate like that? There's nothing on earth that works like that. Like, including other countries that are poorer than China, like South Africa or Brazil. There's a lot of problems in those countries, but the people wouldn't, you know, the lack of communication like this is just impossible. Impossible. They think that it's not. So it's not worth it. It's not worth coming here to put up with this. It's just not. I don't want to live here anymore because of this one thing. Everything else about China, the pollution, the authoritarian government, the censorship. I can't use WeChat or YouTube without using a VPN, which is illegal, but everybody does it. It's just so, even that stuff, I can deal with it, but the lack of control, the lack of communication is just not worth it. And that's why I recommend, if you are not from China, if you are American or whatever, don't come to this country.